Everybody, in this video, we're going to talk about multiplying fractions by whole numbers, which is a good prerequisite topic to talk about before you teach your students how to multiply fractions. So when we were talking about equal sharing, one of the student strategies that we talked about, if Maggie had 8 slices of pumpkin bread and was trying to divide it equally between 3 people, was to take each piece and divide it equally into 3 pieces and give each person one of those pieces. We talked about how some students will think about this problem as 1/3 plus 1/3 plus 1/3, basically like 8 times to get the answer 8 thirds. And other students will think about it as 1/3 times 8 because the process of dividing up each piece into 3 pieces and giving each person a third is happening 8 times. And in both cases, you get the answer 8 thirds, but they're just two different ways of thinking about it. And so, if you've done an activity like this with your students, you can use this activity to introduce the idea of multiplying a fraction by a whole number. And another way that you can help your students visualize the process of multiplying fractions by whole numbers is either with area models or with number line models. So if you had 1/4 times 3, if you were to use an area model, you would visualize this as 1/4. And then when you multiply it by 3, you're making 3 copies of it. And this makes it pretty easy to see that 1/4 times 3 should be 3/4. If you were to do it on a number line, the way that you would do it is you would say, okay, well, I'm going to go the distance of 1/4, and I'm going to do that 3 times. So there's 1 unit of 1/4, another one, and another one. And again, we get the same answer, which is 3/4. And this is an example of multiplying a unit fraction by a whole number. Let's look at what would happen if we did a non-unit fraction. So in this case, we have 3/8 times 5. And in an area model, it might look something like this, where I have 3/8 of a circle and I have 5 copies of it. And if you were to count up all of these eights, you would have 3/8, then 6/8, 9/8, 12/8, and 15/8. And so the answer to this would be 15/8. You could also show this on a number line by having 5 sections of 3/8. So I could go from 0 to 3/8, then go another 3/8, then another 3/8, another 3/8, and another 3/8. And we end up at this point, which is 1/8 before the number 2. And since 2 is 16/8, that point is 15/8. So whether you use an area model or a number line model, the idea of multiplying a fraction by a whole number is that you're making a certain number of copies of that fraction. And you could do this with any type of area model. So I've been using circles on the last few slides, but you could also use squares or rectangles or even other polygons, as long as you can split up the polygon equally into the denominator. So if we had 2/7 times 3, basically you could imagine making 3 copies of 2/7. And you could do that with 3 separate squares and then combine them all together to get 6/7. Or you could say, okay, here's one group of 2/7. Here's another group of 2/7. And here's another group of 2/7. And so when I make 3 copies of the number 2/7, I end up with the answer of 6/7. So you can use any type of shape you want to represent the multiplication of fractions by whole numbers. Um, but that's kind of the basic idea of how you can help your students understand how to multiply fractions by whole numbers. So if you have any questions, let me know, and I hope you have a good day.